Morning. I'm Lynn Montgomery, part of the worship team. And our opening words this morning are Ready by Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, and their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks under their shoulders. Exodus 12:34. You'll need to travel light. Take what you can carry: a book, a poem, a battered tin cup, your child strapped to your chest, clutching your necklace in one hot, possessive fist. So the dough isn't ready. So your heart isn't ready. You haven't said goodbye to the places where you hid as a child, to the friends who aren't interested in the journey, to the graves you've tended. But if you wait until you feel fully ready, you may never take the leap at all. And infinity is calling you forth out of this birth canal and into the future's wide expanse. Learn to improvise flat cakes without yeast. Learn to read new alphabets. Wear God like a cloak and stride forth with confidence. You won't know where you're going. But you have the words of our sages, the songs of our mothers, and the inspiration wrapped in your kneading bowl. Trust that what you carry will sustain you and take the first step out the door.
I think our packages were delivered to the wrong room. It's a nice sturdy stand though. I can't really sit on it though, but I'm wondering if there's any young people who'd like to come forward, young at heart, however you identify, you'd like to come forward. We're just gonna have a little time together to figure out what's going on with all these boxes. So good to see you all. I'm wondering if someone hasn't even opened our Wonder Box in a while or really feels like this is my week. I feel like I've earned it. Yeah, go on. Come on up. All right, look at this. Nice. This is brass. This is very nice. Okay, you just do it from the bottom there. Oh, perfect. Uh-oh. Ooh. Okay, well, why don't you okay, here, let me hold that. This looks like a very delicate pocket knife. Thank you for sitting down. I said to someone the other day at Susan Frederick Gray's installation service that I was not a Boy Scout. I was a theater kid because I was trying to pinpoint north in their sanctuary and I really messed up. And likewise, I'm not exactly sure how to use this, but I think it will serve well as a prop. So we have these boxes. You know what they are? I think I remember now. I think I remember. About, let's see, 8 days ago, how many of you came down to City Hall in Columbus for a little rain time, We were there not just to play in the rain. We were actually there for something really important, although rain is super fun. We were there because we had something called what's that? A march. We had a march, and what were we marching for? Does everyone know? Rights. You're right. And we were marching to say, what was the name of it? Hands off. Hands off. Hands off our democracy, hands off our, let's see, public education, hands off our Medicare, our Medicaid, things that we kind of need. And there was another one, hands off our immigrant neighbors. Those are a lot of big words. What does immigrant neighbors mean? Anyone know? Well, what does neighbors mean? We got that one. You got any neighbors? Whether you live out in the rural area or close, what's a neighbor? Yeah, next to you, near you, somewhere in your neighborhood. I wonder if that's where that word comes from. Neighborhood. And what is an immigrant? What does that word mean? Anyone know? Or out there? An immigrant might be someone who has migrated to this community or this land. Anyone who's not an indigenous person was an immigrant at one point to this land, legally or illegally. And some would say there's no such thing as illegal immigration because there's no such thing as boundaries. But we can take that another day, okay? That might be a little too much for today. Today, one of the things we unveiled during that very wet day was that we are going to stand with our immigrant neighbors. Because did you know that some people, like in your schools or in your neighborhood, some people are embraced more than others? Like on the playground, some people like have people run up to them right away and they're like, I want to play with you. And other kids are like, no one wants to play with me. Did you notice that on the playground or in school or in your work? Sometimes people discriminate, big word, that one's like aren't nice or pick between two different people because of things like the color of their skin or their education or their class, like how much money they have. Or the languages they speak. And immigrant neighbors oftentimes are discriminated against by people who are from here because we just, I think some people just don't know how to talk to people who are different from them. And sometimes people have these stories about people who are different that are negative, like that person is more violent or that person is suspicious. But reality, the more we talk to people who are different from ourselves, the more we realize, wow, that person has love in their heart just like me. And that person likes Pokemon just like me. Did you know that? It's a very popular game. And so one of the things we're doing by supporting our immigrant neighbors is saying we want Columbus and we want Southern Indiana, so down to Seymour and up to all these different places. You all travel far and wide from Hartsville and all these places, is to say that we want you to feel welcome here, not just only on our terms, but on your terms as well, right? And so let's see if we can figure out what's in here now. Okay, I'm gonna, oh, this one needs a little grease here. I was gonna open this up to the group, but I think I'll just, there we go. Let's see. Oh gosh, let's see what's in here. Let's see. Okay. Oh, no, my scarf. Okay, let's see. Don't cut my scarf, I know. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Oh, what this is? Oh, I remember now. These are pieces of metal. I love pieces of metal. Each one of you, it's an H or an H or an, no. What is it? An A. See, open to interpretation. Here, you get this one. Okay, no, you know what? I bet there's something else. Lynn, you can hold this real quick. What is it? Oh, a ladder. Oh, it's something to put signs on? Let's see. Oh, gosh. Oh, should have thought this through before I got all these props. Very physical comedy here. Okay, let's see here. Oh, you know what? Hold this here. I'm going to hold it right here. Oh, look at this. Look at these. Look at these beautiful signs. What does this say? Okay, let me see. Any readers here? With immigrant neighbors. Does anyone see these in your neighborhood already? Oh my gosh. And is anyone like, where's my sign, Nick? Yeah, I know. Well, we bought 100 signs for the congregation, thanks to your generosity and ongoing work. And what we're going to do is everyone, I hope, if you don't have one, we'll leave with one today so you can put it in your yard and we can distribute those after the service. But what happens when we put our sign in our yard? What do you think someone who drives by might think? What do you think? They're going to think about that house. Yeah. It's cool. Is that what he said? Yeah, it's a cool house. That's right. They probably play Pokemon there. Yeah. What do you think about that house? Yeah. They'd probably be like, those are some nice and outgoing folks. I agree. Now, and if I was an immigrant coming to this country, I might say, that house might be a safe place for me. That place might be a place that I would feel welcome. Or if I was not an immigrant and I drove by that house, I might say, why don't I have one of those signs? Where do I get one of those signs? And if I was a person who would never have such a sign, I might say, why do all these people have all these signs? Is there a story I'm telling myself that might not be true, or that maybe there's something more to this story that I don't know? And maybe I need to open my heart a little more to hear that story, okay? So remember that just like the story we're going to hear about today with the adults about Passover, there's a big thing that happened after that fateful night, or those fateful many nights, and it was all this time out in the wilderness, migrating to somewhere potentially better than where they found it. Yes? Yeah. Beware the ducks. See, all these signs can really keep us safe for the critical work of our democracy. So beware them ducks. And so when you go out today and you take these home, if someone drives by and they slow down a little bit, maybe think, oh, wait, don't go so fast. I got extras, or I can get you one next week, right? Or if you have a neighbor who doesn't come here, you could say, oh, well, why don't you come on next week? You could have a sign too. Or you can just bring them one as well, because we got 100 signs and we want them all to go out. So please do take one before you leave today. You don't take them now. I'll take this A or H or I. And we're going to sing our children and youth off to their classes today.
Well, I grew up in a family of storytellers. Graham knew and told stories of plants and healing. Grandpa told stories of hunting, rivalries, and acts of bravery. Mom and Dad told of coyote and bear and spirits, particularly if there was a moral lesson there. It's like you could get in trouble if you don't behave. So, for many groups, storytelling is a sacred act and an extension of memory. Indigenous peoples, whether in the Americas, Australia, or elsewhere, endured colonization that sought to strip them of their land, language, culture, and traditions. Policies like forced assimilation, residential schools, and land seizures were tools of cultural erasure. Despite this, Indigenous communities have fought to preserve their heritage and reclaim their rights, showcasing remarkable resilience. The Hebrews, on the other hand, faced persecution across millennia, from enslavement in ancient Egypt to the horrors of the Holocaust. Their story is one of displacement and survival, maintaining a strong cultural and religious identity despite repeated attempts to marginalize or annihilate them. The treatment of Indigenous people and the heroes offers a stark lens into the complexities of our history, the power of dynamics, and resilience. Both groups have faced systemic oppression, displacement, and attempts to erase their cultural identities, yet unique historical and geographical contexts shape their experiences. While both groups share a history of suffering and resilience, the contexts differ. Indigenous people often contend with ongoing effects of colonization, while the Hebrew struggles have often been tied to displacement and the challenges of maintaining an identity. Passover holds deep significance within the Hebrew tradition as a celebration of liberation and resilience, particularly in the context of their historical struggles. It commemorates the Exodus, the Hebrews' escape from slavery in ancient Egypt led by Moses. The name Passover refers to the biblical event where God spared the Hebrews, passing over their homes during the final plague. This pivotal moment symbolizes their deliverance, from oppression and the reclaiming of their identity and freedom. When seen side by side, Passover's commemoration emphasizes the enduring power of cultural traditions and storytelling as a source of strength. A lesson that Indigenous communities have also embodied in their efforts to preserve their heritage. What stands out in both narratives is the enduring spirit of these communities. Their stories remind us of the importance of cultural preservation and the need to address historical injustices. They both have shown perseverance and the need and the importance of hope. Throughout history, the written story of the groups has been erased or destroyed, and if stories don't remain, that history is gone with the loss of memory. The written word can be banned or burned and lost forever. Why this obsession with storytelling? Besides, it keeps your kids in line. The simplest answer is that we are the story we tell about ourselves. There is an intrinsic, perhaps necessary link between the narrative and identity. In the words of the thinker who did more than most to place this idea at the center of contemporary thought, Alasdair MacIntyre wrote, "Man is, in his actions and practice, as well as in his fictions, essentially a storytelling animal. We come to know who we are by discovering of which story or stories we are a part of."
We have one reading today to guide us. It is written by Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Victoria Safford, and it's called Desert Spring. It's a little longer, but it's worth telling. They had no idea where they were going when they left that night in the dark, without lights, without shoes, without bread, their children smothered against them so they would make no noise. They had no idea what they were getting into, following this Moses, this wild-eyed one who claimed visions and made promises, but who, after all, could guarantee them nothing except death if they were caught. They had no idea, these slaves, what it could mean, this promise of land, their own country, and life abundant. Of freedom, they knew nothing except that they could taste by living in its opposite, slavery. And that taste became a hunger, and that hunger became insatiable till they were ravenous for freedom. And they went out then. But no one knows to this day whether they were led by Moses or by the outstretched arm and mighty hand of something else, of something eternal, as they would afterwards and always claim, or whether their own human hungry will, their will, made them flee that night from Pharaoh. They went into the wilderness. They wandered 40 years, which in those days was a lifetime. 40 was a good old age. So many of them died before getting anywhere. And many were born in the desert and grew to adulthood knowing nothing but the journey. Not slavery, not freedom, just the going. They whined and complained and muttered, and some mutinied, for they were a stiff-necked and rebellious people. You can read it for yourself. Ungrateful people, even when manna rained down from heaven and quails were sent to feed them. Unhappy people, longing out loud even for the familiar security of Egypt, of all places. Or at least they knew what to expect, as awful as it was. Impatient people, making cheap little idols and gods of metal to bargain with in secret when the traveling got hard or merely dull, and the days and years became monotonous. In the springtime, we remember the promised land is not a destination, it is a way of going. The land beyond the Jordan, that country of freedom and dignity and laughter, you carry it inside you all the while. It is planted in your mind and heart already before you ever start out, before it even occurs to you that in order to leave that life in Egypt, the intolerable bondage of that life, what you need to do is stand up and walk forward. Two weeks ago, I was thankful to sit and receive a beautiful service led by Sandra Bolte and our guest, the Reverend Laura Beth Buchleiter. Reverend LB spoke on the important message of cultivating inner peace as a form of resistance. And while there were many highlights for me in that service, including the beautiful song that she wrote and sang, I was moved particularly by her wise reversal of the idiom, the calm before the storm. Do you remember that? She insisted and encouraged us to consider instead the reassurance that comes from memory and through faith of, quote, the storm before the calm. The storm before the calm. And it was a simple, obvious, yet so easy to forget truth that if there is a cyclical nature to reality, to the eternal journey of life and death and rebirth, so too would there be cycles that we experience between the real and metaphorical storms and the quiet calm and liberating peace that will surely follow once more. Yet we live in a time when respite, when sanctuary from the storm all too often seems distant and short-lived, if not altogether a delusion. Through political extremism, economic crisis, deportation and separation of families through ICE, not to mention the Department of Corrections, and countless other fraying of the threads of our society, the shelter from the storm is leaving us, some more than others, stranded, wet and cold, wondering when and from where will our help come. In such times as these, I find refuge in the stories of struggle and liberation, of trial and triumph from people and communities near and far, stories of overcoming odds and making it through the storm, those recent and those long ago. And often when I look for courage from these stories, I find multicolored threads of resilience, of courage, of love, that weave not only these stories together, but threads that tie us all of us up as one humanity, as one ecology, as Dr. King said, in a single garment of destiny. The story and people we are commemorating today, that of Passover, as experienced by the Hebrew community in the Jewish tradition, is one of these stories. Passover is one of the threads that holds us together even now in these storms in which we find ourselves. As Lynn reflected, the power of stories, those spoken and written, are not just in their content, but in their perseverance, their audacious persistence of being handed down one generation to the next through trial and triumph, through storm and the calm that follows. The story of Passover, or of stories from any religious or cultural tradition, are transformative in and of themselves because they have made it through times of storm and those of calm, through times of hardship and times when peace still seems possible. Now, for this story, the story of Passover, like many born and raised Unitarian Universalists like myself, I first learned the story during my second grade religious education class titled Holidays and Holy Days. I wonder if that's why I named my child. Well, anyway. Along with other children, I was told this dramatic story about this holiday, this holy day of the struggle between Moses and Pharaoh, between the Israelites and the Egyptians, and of course, God's liberating love to free those oppressed from the systems of oppression in which they were living. Over time, my second grade understanding of this story took on a deeper and richer meaning, of course, because, as Lynn mentioned, I began to see threads that connected it to other stories and other cycles of struggle and liberation. One of these stories that helped shift how I approached this important religious and cultural story that is, or should be relevant, not only to our Jewish siblings, but to those from all backgrounds, pathways, and identities, is one told by the late Brazilian educator, Paulo Freire. I mentioned Paulo Freire a few weeks ago in passing during the Beacon Interfaith Dialogue I engaged up here with Brittany Phillips. Paulo Freire's most essential work is his 1968 book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. In it, he tells the story of our cyclical struggle between those who are oppressed and those who are oppressors. In this foundational text in the field of critical pedagogy, Freire articulates what he sees as the very human tendency to repeat patterns of life, death, and rebirth. In this sense, the stories that we tell again and again are retold both because it helps to keep them alive, but also because the content of the stories and their import continue to warrant retelling. So the liberation of the Israelites from Pharaoh in ancient Israel is not the first nor the last example of overcoming unthinkable odds for the Jewish people. But it also has universal import to all, for all of us to consider. When hearing a story, whether from Jewish history, indigenous history, or any part of human history, we are invited to ask many questions, including critical considerations, namely these: how do I fit into this story? Which character or role do I most associate with? And how is this story playing out today in 2025? I'll just say those really again quick. How do I fit into this story? Which character or role do I most associate with? And how is this story playing out today in 2025? Paulo Freire argues in his understanding of human existence that we are all caught up, not just in a network of mutuality and in a single garment of destiny, but also in a perpetual struggle between not only the oppressed-oppressor dynamic, but our fluid movement between these two roles. In other words, the larger story of our human experience and existence can be that at times we find ourselves aligned with or playing the character of Moses and the Israelites, and other times with that of Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And while we might prefer to just be on one side of this story, Freire would suggest that without a critical pedagogy or a way of learning about our individual and interdependent struggle, we will continue to flow in and out of power and privilege, oppression and subjugation, a spiral dance, a circle, a continuous metamorphosis wherein we turn and return again to the story as it was first told and the story as it continues to play out year after year after year. Freire welcomes a new story that helps us to free us from the patterns and binary of the original. The pedagogy of the oppressed, he suggests, must find a way through the liberation process to avoid the reversals of roles. This is to say, how can we learn from the times of our struggle? How can we learn from the times of our struggle and storm and from those of our agency and peace? Can we look with humility and curiosity how the perennial stories, the timeless stories worthy of retelling, invite us to write new stories where we not only find our own liberation, but liberate all of our characters, not only out of our own oppression, but from the original stories to which we are bound. Because after all, we are bound to these stories, accountable to these stories, receiving them year after year to learn once more the meaningful message at the surface and the wonderful wisdom that lies much deeper. The power and beauty of the Passover message is that it is relevant to not only those who identify as Jewish, or Christian for that matter, who share this ancient history. It is a story also for any who identify with the Israelites and the Egyptians, to those who identify personally as religious or spiritual or secular. It is a story like all stories that invites empathy and consideration for how we in our humanness can play different roles at different times, even at the same time, and who, by the gift of our character, can find a new way out of no way and write a new story that presents a new ending. This year, in 2025, we find ourselves in a bit of wilderness. As my colleague, the Reverend Victoria Saffords, spoke on the long journey beyond the escape of Pharaoh, the in-between time, the chrysalis time, the interregnum, the labor, a time when the storm is not at full force, but could resurge at any time, this time that we find ourselves in. As a nation, we are in the struggle of our lifetimes. Some of us who are older may have experienced many of these times in their lifetimes, times where our country's democracy and values have been tested. Today perhaps is like no other time because the seemingly high stakes we feel, and because indeed this time is a retelling of the ancient story unique to this time, which none of us have been in before, this time, right now, this morning. So how are we seeing this story play out this year? Take the example I spoke to earlier. Since the time of colonization, when people forcibly entered these lands that knew no boundaries, that once knew no boundaries, but that did strive for peace and good stewardship of them, when those folks came, we have seen since a story of migration told time and time again. Some of these tellings are stories of conquest, violence, and devastation. Some include devastation, but more so because of those who come to this country hoping to escape the violent circumstances of their own homelands. Immigrants from areas of Central and South America and from the Caribbean, for example, have come to the United States by any means necessary, diverse reasons, carrying with them the devastating stories of hardship and trauma, of experiences of oppression and bondage, and sometimes circumstances that were exacerbated, if not the direct result of U.S. foreign involvement in their internal civil struggles. The epic of the United States is, in large part, a series of migration stories, not dissimilar to the story that followed Passover, where, as Reverend Safford reminds us, so much is always at stake. Take these words she began with about the Israelites and apply them to our immigrant neighbors. Quote, "They had no idea where they were going when they left that night in the dark, without lights, without shoes, without bread, their children smothered against them so they would make no noise. They had no idea what they were getting into, following this Moses, this wild-eyed one who claimed visions and made promises, but who, after all, could guarantee them nothing except death if they were caught." End quote. How do we find ourselves in the story of Passover this year? In the stories of migration, too many to tell, in the struggle between the oppressed and oppressor, and the possibility of breaking the cycle of our lives? Can we imagine a new way, a new weaving of the garment of this nation that can welcome all, clothe all, care for all? Can we strive not just for an end to bondage for some, but the practice of bondage for all, or by all? I believe the answer is not only yes, but we are striving for steadfastly and imperfectly this here at UUCCI. I believe we are weaving new threads, telling new stories, while remembering that the stories of yesterday, the frayed edges of yesteryear, are still with us, are still in us, they are still us. In our remembering of this Passover story today and in the days to come, may we find new ways of relating to and locating ourselves in it. May we do so not as original characters in this story, but migrants to it, receivers of it, and bearers of the responsibility to keep its memory alive and its promise still shining like a star in the cold desert spring night. A night where, despite the mystery and uncertainty, the fear and anxiety that envelops us still, there is another reality. We do not travel alone. May it be so. And amen.